order, and a very warm welcome to this week's Work and Pensions Select Committee oral evidence session. And we're delighted to be joined by the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Pat McFadden, and of course his Permanent Secretary, Sir Peter Schofield. Welcome to both of you. We have a range of questions for you this morning, and I'm going to kick off. And this is specifically looking at safeguarding. You will know, Secretary of State, that every year people who are reliant on social security support die prematurely, including by a suicide. And the Select Committee undertook an inquiry into this, our Safeguarding Vulnerable Claimants inquiry. You will also be aware that in 2023, 40 people were investigated by your department in terms of their death during being a claimant. Last July, your annual report reported that this had increased from 40 in 23-24 to 59 in 24-25. So not the trajectory that we would want to see, obviously. But I want to refer particularly to the letter that I received last night from you in relation to progress around safeguarding. And in this, you talk about a plan of action, a new safeguarding team to drive the strategy and deliver the plan. I wondered if you could describe what the role of the new safeguarding team will be in assessing the potential harms, for example, of new policies.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure for me to be here before you for the first time in my capacity as Secretary of State. I know that you personally and the committee have taken a great interest in this issue for some time. This is a department that deals with about 20 million people across the piece, and a number of those people are going to be vulnerable. They are going to have a lot of issues that make their lives very stressful. We see this in our role as constituency MPs as well. And so it's important that the department and its operations understands that and treats all these customers with respect and in the right way. In terms of the letter that I sent to you yesterday, anticipating that you would be interested in this area, there's quite a lot of work going on. On the training side, this level 1 training has been offered to all civil servants, but probably more directly, a higher level of level 3 training is being carried out with the medical health practitioners. That's probably more relevant directly. And it's important that they get that and they understand the training and their responsibilities that they have. I also think it's important in terms of a line of responsibility in the department. So we've got a specific Director General with responsibility for this now, and the Chief Medical Advisor, Gail Alsop, is leading a lot of the work on this. And I think she's doing a good job on this. When you have tragedies and you have serious case panels and reviews and things like that, I think there is understandable public scepticism about some of the phrases used, lessons learned and so on. It is important to have these serious case panels. I think they do help us learn, but I hope that the department doesn't just look at this with a rear view mirror, learning from what's gone wrong, but actually has an active process to try to make sure that we deal with people in the best way that we can.
Can I then come back to my question? Sure. Because what has tended to, the focus of the department has tended to be at a frontline role. You just mentioned in your response that you want to try and make sure that you deal with customers in a sensitive way. My question was specifically about a key recommendation that our report made, which was about having a systems-based approach to safeguarding, that it was everybody's responsibility, that it looked at safeguarding at every level of policy development through to implementation and, of course, review. So, for example, in terms of the pathways to work, green paper, how would you have adopted a greater safeguarding role with the structures that you're developing now?
Well, I think it should be systems-based. I think you're right. It's not just a matter for the frontline staff. They're, of course, dealing directly with the most vulnerable customers. They're often not the highest paid civil servants either, and we ask a lot of them. But it should be in Caxton House too. It should be in the department. That's why I think having a specific Director General with responsibility, having the Chief Medical Advisor to the department working on this, make sure that it is a system-based approach, to use your phrase. I'm not going to sit here and say it's job done. It's clearly not. But I think it is something that we take seriously. That's why I wanted to write to you before coming. And when there's any new policies, such as Pathways to Work that you mentioned, of course this should be built into it.
Okay, well that's very reassuring that you say that to the committee. And I would look forward to that. Can I ask if there's any, if you're able to give any specific examples of how this new group might, for example, use evidence, and obviously the Prime Minister, and I know you feel strongly about evidences as well, Secretary of State. So how would you use evidence that is available, for example, from previous changes to welfare policy?
Well, I'll bring Peter in a second on this. So I did mention serious case panels and reviews, and I said they weren't the answer to everything because they often happen after a tragedy has taken place. And I don't just want it to be a rear view exercise, but I do think they are important in giving us the evidence of what has gone wrong somewhere and how should we learn from it. Peter, do you want to say a bit more about how we use these?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the serious case panel, and we've talked before in this committee about how we've learned from that and some of the things we've done in the wake of some of the things that have gone wrong. For example, decisions around how we work with appointees, decisions around how we work in a situation where we've lost contact with a customer, decisions about how we work together where someone has been underpaid a significant amount of money, and we need to pay them that money back in a way that is meets their needs. And this is all informed by learning the lesson and thinking forward about how we can do safeguarding most effectively. So the Chief Medical Advisor is involved. She's heavily embedded in policy making. I see her on a regular basis. She's involved in submissions that come to ministers on relevant issues as well. And what you'll have seen over the years is a development on this. I mean, I regard this very much, as the Secretary of State has said, as not job done, but progress made. First of all, in thinking about how we reach out and support people with complex needs, making sure that we're aware of that in the front line. And secondly, in terms of how safeguarding works, in terms of ensuring that we avoid protecting people from harm, abuse or neglect. So as the Secretary of State has said, we focused initially on the clinical professionals, 5,300 clinical professionals, many of which work with our outsourced providers, and making sure that they're effectively trained up to level 3 in safeguarding. We're rolling out level 1 training for frontline staff, but in fact all staff as well. And I was chairing a meeting of all the senior civil servants across DWP only yesterday, and we have Safeguarding Awareness Week, and I was encouraging every one of them to do the safeguarding training as well. Because as the Secretary of State says, I want this to be embedded in everything that we do, and it's policy making and other systems as well as the front line. But obviously in the front line is where the most direct implications come through. I
would suggest actually getting the policy right is the most important thing, and then making sure people deliver is the culture that we are hopefully developing. A more supportive culture would be the most important thing. But I'm going to move on now. Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. There are currently 702,000 young people between 60 and 24 that are unemployed, which is up 60,000 from last year. A lot of employers blame that on the Employment Rights Bill that's coming through and also on the increase in national insurance. So now more than ever, it's important that skills and apprenticeships are focused on to ensure that young people have the best chance in life. I'm just wondering, what can the DWP achieve in the skills and apprenticeship space that the Department for Education couldn't achieve?
This is a really important area, and thank you for your question. We have a lot of graphs in the DWP, and I've looked at a lot of graphs in the 3 months or so since I was appointed, and some of the ones that have struck me the most are those concerning young people. And the curve of the graphs doesn't begin a year ago. A lot of the steep rise in what's happening with certain forms of inactivity goes back 5 or 6 years. And so we've got to take the long sweep to go to what the Chair said about evidence, to look at what's been happening for some time. In terms of your specific question about bringing skills and apprenticeships into the DWP, this is an important machinery of government change for us. It will give us, the DWP was already trying to do work in the labour market, trying to encourage people into work. I always say, I think what the DWP does should really be about two things in the main. It should be about security for those who are reliant on the various benefits that we pay, but it should also be about opportunity and not people being trapped on benefits if they can move on from them. So I think this is very, very important. I am very concerned about the long 5-6 year rise in NEETs, which we have seen. We've got almost 1 million young people not in education, employment or training. A growing number of them are reporting medical conditions as part of that picture. And so what I want to do with bringing the skills portfolio of post-18 skills into the department is to have as active a labour market policy as we can, tilting apprenticeships more towards young people as a matter of policy, but trying to get the young people who are out of work the opportunity.
Given that the Department for Education is still retaining parts of the skills brief, how are we going to ensure this joined up approach by government departments? One of my frustrations on this committee, which I've made many times, is about different departments having responsibilities that often overlap and there's no one held to account for delivery of those policies. And I know, as formerly at the Cabinet Office, you will probably have similar frustrations. How can we ensure that departments are still working together to deliver on policy?
Well, I talked about a 5-year timescale. This is a 100-year timescale of Whitehall silos. One advantage that we have as a joint minister, I'm delighted to say that Jackie Smith, the skills minister, stayed on in that post after the reshuffle. She has 1 foot in the DFE, as it were, and 1 foot in the DWP. That really helps. It is undoubtedly true, let me be candid with the committee, that the Whitehall structure can give rise to the kind of problems that you talk about. But it is for ministers to and their officials to do everything we can to overcome those. And I think there is if you look around the world where the skills policy lies, sometimes it lies in whatever the Department for Education is called in a particular country, and sometimes it lies in whatever the Ministry of Labour is called in a particular country. We've made a decision that the Ministry of Labour answer, as it were, is a better place to put it. We're at the early stages of this, but if it works, it should mean that on apprenticeship policy, on adult skills, and on the work that the DWP was doing on labour markets anyway, we can bring this together in a more coordinated way to get the help to the young people who are out of work to whom you referred.
Just touching on, we touched on the kind of the structures of government. I mean, I've had conversations with politicians and officials from the Department for Education about why the skills agenda often got bogged down. And there was certainly a perception that the civil service just didn't buy into it because the leadership in the civil service They didn't want that for their children. They didn't buy into the apprenticeship route or the skills route. They wanted their children to go to Oxbridge and get PPE and then go into the civil service fast track. They didn't believe in it. So how are you confident that the mentality and the mindset in your department is such to deliver on this policy?
Yeah, I don't think there's a problem with the way that you paint that picture. And I've never been a believer in pitting apprenticeships and FE against higher education. I am for the expansion of opportunity, whichever route people choose. If I look at my own constituency of Wolverhampton South East, we probably don't have enough people in Wolverhampton South East going on to higher education, and there's a debate about that too. But when it comes to apprenticeships and skills, I think these are highly valued. If any of us knocks a door in our constituency and asks our constituents, do you want to see more apprenticeships? They are likely to say yes. The policy issues are, if you've got a limited sum of money, where do you spend it to get the most bang for your buck and create the most opportunity? And the decision we are taking, which isn't always an easy one, is to tilt that more towards young people. Because if we can get young people into work, then the benefits of that stay with them for a lifetime. And conversely, if they are out of work and they get used to a life on benefits or stuck on a life on benefits, then the cost of that also stays with them for a long time too. So I don't think it's a mindset problem. I think we've brought this together, and it's our job to do the best job we can with it now, with the other things that the DWP was already doing.
Just finally, touching on apprenticeships, before another colleague wants to come in on this. A number of, actually 600 employers expressed concern about the Level 7 apprenticeship changes in terms of the funding support for those because of the impact it will have on economic growth. What are your thoughts on that when so many employers are expressing concern about the change?
It's exactly the kind of choice we have to make. And if we say you can spread the butter wherever you wish on very high level apprenticeship funding, we will have less money for young people. We will have less money for foundation apprenticeships. And this is, if you like, a microcosm of government in general. You have to make choices, and we've made a choice to tilt the money more towards young people. I think it's the right choice because of the reasons I said in response to your questions a moment or two ago. It will expand more opportunity, and the benefits of it will last for a lot longer in people's lives.
Can I come back, Mr. Bedford, on the points you made about the culture in the civil service a bit earlier? Just to say, I mean, in DWP, we have 80,000 colleagues, and they are driven by wanting to get people into work. And 93% of people who do an apprenticeship move into sustained employment afterwards. So apprenticeships are a really important part of the overall labour market strategy. As the Secretary of State says, they are a really important part of the offer that we can give here across the people that we support, all across job centres, across the land.
Thank you. Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the Right Honourable for coming to see us today. I mean, apprenticeships, I'm really pleased that skills has moved into work and pensions. I actually think this is a really important step, looking at long-term skills development and the impact that has on good work for those that are currently unemployed. Looking at the data on apprenticeships, one of the things that my employers tell me, I've got a lot of small construction organisations in my constituency, is that the length of the apprenticeship is often a barrier for them. So how do you perceive some of the shortening of apprenticeships actually adding to that ability for the SME sector to engage in offering good training for young people?
Really good question. So on length, we have shortened the length for some apprenticeships from 12 to 8 months, but some employers have told us that actually they want more flexibility than that even the 8 months is longer than they need. So we are, as well as the tilt towards youth, also moving to shorter courses. which will be apprenticeship units, if you will, because I think this is all funded out of a levy that employers pay. So we want there are certain things that government will make policy decisions about, and we discussed them in the last set of questions. But I also want to try to respond to employers where I can. So a move to shorter courses is something that we are doing. Also with construction, we have a specific package that we've put funding into, just as we have with the uplift on defence expenditure, where you can sometimes see a national goal, in this case building 1.5 million homes, or the uplift in defence expenditure, and those things need to be backed up with a skills policy that helps to train our people to do them. And while we're on this subject, Madam Chair, I should also say, for me this is a matter of equality too, because the inequality impacts of the NEET figures don't fall in a uniform way across the country. If you look at where the NEET rates are worst, it's in the northeast and the northwest, followed by the east and west Midlands. So if we care about inequality and opportunity, we should also really care about this agenda. So yes to the shorter courses, to apprenticeship units, to this being a bit more flexible. We will, of course, I have to say, as we try to respond in a more flexible manner, also have to make sure that we maintain quality. Skills England, the new organisation, has got a very important role in this. The reason I said when we knock doors and we ask our voters, do you think we should have more apprenticeships, and they say yes, is they believe that it's a mark of quality to do that. So we've got to always bear that in mind as we make the system more flexible too.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're moving on to David Baines.
Thank you. Good morning. I think we can all agree that nearly 1 million young people out of education, employment and training is a bad thing, and we all want to address that. It's recently been announced that the former Health Secretary Milburn is going to lead an inquiry into it. My question is, there's a lot already known and already said about NEETs, the reasons behind it and the trends and everything like that. Why is this inquiry needed? How is it going to help? The government's already announced policies such as Youth Guarantee, Youth Trailblazers. What difference is this inquiry going to make, and how is it going to help us move forward?
Yeah, of course some stuff is known, but I mentioned earlier that in my first 3 months I'd looked at a lot of graphs, and the ones that have really jumped out at me have been the ones concerning young people and inactivity and illness. And the reason I asked Alan Milburn to do his report was I think we need to ask ourselves 2 big questions here. The first is what's going on, and the second is what is the right policy response to it. And to go back to Mr. Bedford's question, I want that policy response to be considered not just as a matter of benefits, but right across the piece. If you look at the terms of reference that we've written for Alan Milburn, it talks about policy responses. That's a very deliberately chosen phrase. He is a good person to do this for several reasons. He's a former Secretary of State for Health, and health is a big and growing part of this NEET problem. He is also a former chair of the Social Mobility Commission, so he really cares about opportunity, about breaking down barriers, about what holds people back, and that takes me to the inequality point I made a moment or two ago. And he also recently completed an important piece of work in Barnsley about economic inactivity and what was lying behind it there. So I think he has a background and a level of curiosity and energy about this issue that makes him an excellent person to do this report. And I tell you, this is a real priority for me as Secretary of State, because I care about this NEETs issue. I care about the inequality that lies underneath it, and we cannot start off saying we've got nothing to learn about this or nothing to change when the rates of NEETs have been going up for some years. And I expect we're going to have new NEETs figures tomorrow. I don't have an insight into them, but I would not be surprised if they have risen again. And I think we have to approach this problem with urgency and with energy And that's why one of the first things I've done as Secretary of State is to ask Alan Milburn to do this report.
Thank you. Just up on the specific policies that have been announced, the youth guarantee and the youth trailblazers, which are for 18 to 21-year-olds. The neat figures are for 16 to 24. Why the trailblazers a narrower aspects of that? And is the what's going to be for those between 16 and 18 and 21?
Yeah. Look, let me talk about the inactivity or the trailblazers on young people. The structure of government, local government, mayoral government has changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. Skills and labour markets change around the country. I think it was right, therefore, to bring the mayors into this and to use the experience of local labour markets to try some things that were particularly tailored. It's a new thing to do in the skills setup, but I think it's a good thing to do. So they are carrying on. 18 to 21 was our manifesto commitment. If I had all the money in the world, maybe I'd do more. But again, to go back to Mr. Bedford's question, we have to make some choices. That's the area we'll really focus on. And I think the youth guarantee is a really important policy announced by the Chancellor. Well, we talked about it before, but given booster rockets, if I can say, by the Chancellor in her conference speech a couple of months ago, where we want to offer young people the chance of work experience, other training, an apprenticeship, or ultimately, if none of that works, then a subsidised job. The important thing is to get young people into the habit of structured activity, whether that's learning in a structured way or whether it's the experience that we all think benefits people of getting up in the morning and having to be at a certain place and the experience of the workplace. And I think it's so important, not just for earnings, although they're important too, but also for a sense of pride and purpose. And that's what the Youth Guarantee is aimed at ensuring. Because if we can get to this when people are young, then we can stop this long-term life on benefits, which can often prove to be very sticky and difficult to get people off if they're on them for a number of years.
Amanda Hack.
Just to follow on from that question really is, and actually to pick up Peter's point around crossovers.
Yeah.
In terms of the youth guarantee, how much of a crossover do you think this will have in looking at the industrial strategy and the key sectors that we're going to need jobs for the future in? How are we going to play those things out?
Well, I was saying in response to your earlier question that we have specific packages for construction and for defence. These are growing areas because, partly for geopolitical reasons in terms of defence, but because the government's made a decision in terms of construction and housing. So I think we can tailor things to the growth sectors of the industrial strategy. But if you're not careful in this area, and again being candid with the committee, you'll have 10 different priorities and 10 different pools, and you have to be careful. So if you really press me, this isn't quite the question you asked, but if you really press me and said, when you really have to choose, what's it going to be? It's going to be young people. Yeah. I just want to be clear with the committee about that.
Just to give you an example, I was 3 weeks ago in South Shields meeting a number of partners, but also the Chamber of Commerce and a number of local employers. And what struck me was they said, mathematically, there are quite a lot of opportunities out there for young people. But employers increasingly say they want to have young people they want to have people with experience. And our young people don't have that experience. One of the things that we'll be doing as part of the Youth Guarantee is giving young people the opportunity, a chance to demonstrate what they can do. As the Secretary of State says, give you the opportunity to show what they can do and have a structure, but also to demonstrate to prospective employers that they have a work ethic and they are able to work. And so this is one of the things, giving young people the opportunity that they don't necessarily have to get that first rung on the ladder of a job. And I saw some of that work in South Shields, and we're doing more of that across the country.
Just for really quickly, I mean, I was a huge advocate of future jobs. It worked really well for the employer that I worked for. Was that a consideration about actually how do we encourage employers to take on young people? Because actually young people in the workplace add real, a different prospect for employers. So was future jobs something that you looked at when creating the youth guarantee?
Look at every past programme and every experience that we can. The option we were very keen to avoid, there used to be a phrase about this, I can't remember if it was no fourth option, no fifth option, which was just not doing anything. So all the previous programmes, I think we should have a healthy curiosity about. There is another feature of the system which I think is probably not well enough known or talked about, which is the national insurance break for taking on employees under the age of 21. There's no employer's national insurance unless the person is earning over £50,000 a year, which is quite unlikely in a starter job. That's probably not well enough known, but it's an important signal to employers about the value we place on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Krishna Ali.
Thank you. Good morning. The situation with young people in who fall into the not in education training category, as you mentioned, getting close to 1 million, is not new. It's been going on for years under successive governments. You've talked about a number of different schemes that have been introduced. We need to see them bed in. Can you both talk us through what you expect in terms of impact over the next year and the year after, in terms of bearing down on those numbers? There's the 350,000 who are unemployed, and then obviously the economically inactive group that needs to be more intensive intervention. Could you tell us what we should expect to see in terms of results, given the mix of programmes you've introduced next year and the year after? You must have some projections.
We've got some... I mean, you're right about the problem has been with us for a long time, but it has got worse in the last 4 or 5 years. The growing features in it are, as I said, sickness, the number of NEETs reporting long-term sickness problems has grown a lot as well in the last 4 or 5 years. And that's going back to the Milburn report, that's partly why I wanted him to look into this. We've got the youth guarantee. There will be some more numbers on that soon in terms of next week's events and what we can say about exactly the budget for it and how many young people it will help and so on. So if you bear with us for a few more days on that. What I would also say is, and this speaks to a broader approach in the department, active employment support is becoming a greater feature of what the department does. We might get into this more in later questions, but just in this area, there are a number of programmes where we are trying to get active employment support to people who are out of the labour market for various reasons, either because they're young, because they're sick, because they may be veterans, they may be, there's a number of these different programmes, but they have a common thread, which is personalised employment support to try to help somebody into work in various guises.
Just to go back to the point about outcomes, you would have had the PERMSEC and others going through what the sum of these programmes will mean. You would want to know, over the next year and the year after and so on. And we're seeing some of the impacts already. And it's a given that to begin with, of course, as these programmes bed in, it's going to take, the numbers won't be as high in terms of getting people into work. But what data, have you been given in terms of assurance that these programmes are going to have the desired impact, and what can we expect to see, say, by the end of this Parliament, for example, in terms of how many people in this category would be in work?
Well, I want to see the numbers come down. I'll be able to say a bit more about the numbers in the Youth Guarantee and who can help after the budget. I can't give those today. I've been trying to make sure we have as good a package as possible, but these are collective decisions, and like everything else, they have to be netted off. Maybe there's a different way to look at this. Some of you will have noticed Charlie Mayfield's report the other week, and he had a figure in there whereby for every young person that we can get in work and keep in work over their lifetime, it'll be worth about £1 million to them, with a similar cost on the converse side to the state in all sorts of things if they're not in work. Yeah. So whether that's exactly right or not, that gives you a ballpark figure of the long-term impact for every single person we can get out of this category.
And we know from some of the evidence from the Youth Futures Foundation that there's billions to be gained. So the economic gains of doing, to getting results is crucial, which is why I'm interested in what we expect to see. Just one final...
Can I answer your question about data that's out there, though? Just to enable the committee to know what they can focus on in the here and now. Yep. So we published on the 30th of October our first set of Get Britain Working statistics, and they go down to a local authority level and a job centre district level by different demographic types. And they show interwork rates, but they also show progress through the universal credit conditionality regime. So you can see at a local level the progress that's being made across the board. And then in terms of individual programmes, things that are already underway, like Connect to Work, for example, we do evaluations as we go through those, and those get published along the line. And then, of course, we've got the Youth Trailblazers that are already underway, and those are a new thing, trying to work collectively, as the Secretary of State says, at a local economic geography level, led by local mayoral strategic authorities. And they will be developing their own metrics as they try new ways of bringing together a package of support for young people in 8 of those trailblazers, and so we'll see the results of those coming through in the next couple of years.
Just a final one in terms of careers. We've seen over a number of years career services and all of that dismantled. You're trying to rebuild a whole series of support structures, coaching and so on. How much are you focusing on the other part, which is, of course, around relationships and networks, which are still really important in terms of helping people get into work, the role of mentoring, role of coaching. Obviously, work coaches are really important, but really getting the employers engaged through direct engagement with young people from school age, college, all the way through the job centre plus institutions and so on.
Really good question, and I know that you, Ms. Ali, have a background in mentoring and mentoring programmes. We do fund some of that in the department, and I think that the question of networks and social confidence is really important for young people, because sometimes people can just not have the experiences that would open their eyes to opportunities, or not have the confidence to step forward. And in this world, probably much more so than in the past, with the kind of jobs that are out there, this becomes ever more important. So if I could make a broader point on this, in the 3 months that I've been in the department, I've asked a lot of questions of the officials about what are we spending on these different employment support programmes. How do we know how to get the best value? How creative and imaginative are we being about trying different things? That, of course, entails risk, because people will say, well, you did this and it didn't work. Fine, I will take the rap for that. But I do want the department, if the government has made a decision, as it has, to invest more in employment support across different kinds of programmes, I want us to be constantly asking, are we doing this in the best way? Are we doing it through the best organisations? Are we using the experience of these organisations in the right way? Is there something else over here that we haven't tried that we should be doing? It should be focused on the outcomes that you've rightly stressed at the heart of your question, rather than us always satisfying ourselves that we've gone through the right process.
Yep.
So I think the outcomes are really important, and I think this question of, I don't like to use a jargon phrase like social capital, but that's the phrase people use for this, but confidence, especially for working class children who, where that's sometimes an issue, really important in today's labour market, and if we can help them with it, then we should.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to John Milne.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. From April next year, new claimants for Universal Credit Health benefit will see their award roughly cut in half from today's claimants. And the rationale for this is to incentivise pathways into work. Have you done any modelling on what percentage of this cohort you expect to actually be able to find jobs, and particularly looking at that from a regional point of view, given that the job market does vary very greatly across the country?
So, alongside that change, it's an important change, will come, to go back to Ms Ali's question, more employment support for that particular group. And why did we go down this road? Because the system that we inherited had basically two doors. You go through one door and you're in the intensive work support group, where you have your mandatory 35 hours of job search activity and all of that, and you go through another door, you don't have any of that, and you get double the money. That is the system that we inherited, and it's the system that we are trying to change on a couple of fronts.
I understand the rationale completely,
yeah.
That's fine, but nevertheless, have you modelled what percentage of the cohort do you think will actually find jobs? Because this is a similar scenario to the PIP reforms, and in actual fact only a few percent would ever likely have got jobs. So what is the case, do you think?
I don't think you can say with certainty at the moment. The policy change was to narrow that gap between the UC health payment and the standard payment, and to match that with more employment support for those in that group, partly because of the system that I just described, but also partly because an increasing proportion of the conditions under which people claim these benefits may fluctuate over time. They may not be permanent, and we want to do everything we can not to write people off once that initial decision has been made on their entitlement, and to try to help them into work where possible.
We've obviously published an impact assessment in July on the changes in the Universal Credit Bill. Page 6 of the impact assessment, I think, sets out what we know about the impact of the Pathways to Work support package and how that should support, alongside the changes in incentives that the Secretary of State said by changing the premium.
Thank you. And for those that don't get jobs, have you modelled the impact on them? Because obviously they're getting quite a lot less income.
For those who don't get jobs, they will get the support that they're entitled to going forward, just like anybody else in the benefit system.
Okay, thank you. In the Green Paper, the government said it would publish a white paper in the autumn on the abolition of the work capability assessment, but reports now seem to suggest that has been cancelled. Now, obviously, the WCA is a very fundamental and crucial part of the whole system. So, is that correct? Why the change? And how are we going to move forward if that's not the case?
Well, there were a number of changes in July, as the committee is well aware, and I think it meant we had to relook at how we were taking these things forward. The committee will be aware of the establishment of the TIMS review. We may come on to talk about that in the questions, and he will consider the whole question of PIP with the other reviewers there. So there were some elements of the Green Paper that are now being looked at in a different way. That's also true of what it said about young people, because I've asked Alan Milburn to look at this across the piece. So I think after July, it was right to take into account the legislative changes that Parliament had voted for, and to take this forward in some senses in some slightly different ways.
Will there be clarity about how this process is going to carry on from here? Or?
We'll communicate with you all the time on what we're doing and give you as much clarity as we can, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Labour's manifesto promised to review universal credit, to quote, so it makes work pay and tackles poverty. And in March, the Minister for Social Security and Disability told the House that, despite there being no terms of reference, the review would take place throughout 2025. So presumably that has been ongoing. What has the review looked at so far, and what's it involved?
That's right. So it's looking at a number of different issues in universal credit. For example, the change that was made to the maximum repayment rate should be considered in that light, the change from 25 to 15%.
On deductions?
On deductions,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
On
The
deductions.
fair repayment rate.
The fair repayment rate, the increase in the standard rate of universal credit, and that the discussion that we just had about the difference between standard rates and additional health or disability rates. So there are a number of changes which have been made or legislated for so far on universal credit, and those should all be considered under that umbrella of a review of the system.
And the review started with a massive engagement with people and organisations, roundtables, focus groups and research, and a survey of 10,000 customers. So there was a stage one to build the evidence base, and as the Secretary of State says, beyond that there have been some specific things that have come out from that, such as a change to the fair repayment rate.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Steve Darling.
Thank you, and welcome this morning. I'd like to turn to the TIMS review, and I'm aware that under your watch the terms of reference have been changed around that, talking about sustainability of PIP within the track line to the OBR's projections. There's a risk that those who've engaged with this process may fear that they are aiding the Axeman in respect of PIP. What words of reassurance would you give to them, or what was the rationale behind the refreshed terms of reference?
It's an important exercise, the TIMS review. We've got two co-chairs appointed with Stephen. We're assembling a panel of people from various organisations who represent or who are disabled people or disabled themselves. So I think it will be a really strong group. In terms of the terms of reference, it's important to signal that the job of the TIMS review can't be to come up with more expenditure on this, that it has to work within the budgetary parameters of the rest of the government, within the fiscal rules that the government abides by, and it was important to signal that at the start of the work.
So the Social Security Committee also advised against using the term co-produced. Why did you continue to use that when their advice was not to? Because there are concerns that it may not truly be co-produced.
Well, look, we want to work with disability organisations. It's right that they have a voice in policy. Of course, it's also true that at the end of the day, government has to make its decisions. And that's always the case, because only government has to consider policy in the round. Only government has to consider policy in relation to all the different competing demands there are on government for expenditure across different government departments. So it is important to work with disabled people's organisations, with all the interested groups in this. We want to give a proper voice. I believe that Stephen and I and the department are committed to this. But again, in the spirit of candour with the committee, I do say government in the end has to make the decisions on policy, on financial resources and so on.
Thank you. And are you able to rule out future cuts?
I'm not ruling anything out. I've only been in the job for 3 months, and If I start ruling things out, it just close doors in the future. So I'm not ruling anything out.
Chair, I'd just like to just explore one little area then. Alan Milburn's report, bearing in mind that you talked about being important to co-produce with disabled groups, and I assume hearing the voice of disabled people is very important to you. The Alan Milburn report didn't really engage with young people's groups. Why do you...
It's not started yet.
Yeah. So what confidence can we have that it will be engaging with those younger people's groups?
Yeah.
Are you giving them a direction of that? Because I know I've heard from some disabled groups that they're concerned that there isn't the voice of the young person being heard there necessarily.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure he'll talk to people across the board. As I said, he brings to this a level of curiosity and energy that I think will be a real asset. And I want him to look at this issue of young people work and opportunity right across the piece. That's important, because if we only look at this department by department, with Department A over here looking at their bit of it and Department B over here, we won't really get to the answer, because that's not how people live their lives. People don't live their lives according to neat departmental structures. Why on earth would they? So I think it's up to us to be imaginative enough to frame our policy in the same way.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Damien Egan.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment on the co-production model, and I think Secretary of State, you're quite right in asserting that it's government makes the final decisions. I was just going to flag it's not necessarily need any comment from you, but in terms of the co-production, there's so many good examples from local government of disabled people's commissions that were genuinely co-produced. I know Hammersmith led the way. We did one in Lewisham. I remember being apprehensive at the start, but found it very pragmatic and realistic to the financial challenges that the local authorities were facing. So it's just a kind of plea to look towards some of those examples from local government.
Well, it probably doesn't need much response from me, but if there's good experience in local government, we should, of course, learn from that. We touched on this elsewhere in different policy areas and skills. I think you make a good point.
Joanna Baxter.
Morning, Secretary of State. Morning, Peter Schofield. So you're currently rolling out Connect to Work, the main employment support programme for sick and disabled people. Concerns have been raised with the committee about its rollout, specifically in terms of commissioning. So Enable Works, the largest employment support provider in Scotland, said there appears to be a limited understanding amongst commissioners of what specialist supported employment and IPS are, and how critical fidelity to those models is for achieving better outcomes. Too few providers have the training, experience or infrastructure to deliver those approaches to fidelity, yet contracts have been awarded to organisations without that specialism. How would you respond to that?
I think I referred to this earlier. Well, first of all, it's a really important programme, because I talked about the 2 doors into the system and having a more active approach for people who have, for one reason or another, gone through the door marked long-term disability and sickness benefits. I visited the Connect to Work project in Portsmouth a few weeks ago. Really fantastic help being offered to people. Very often people with a combination of mental health issues and physical issues. It's not always one thing, but really good help, really targeted help, and people really praising the programme. And I say that because some people have said, going back to our discussion about departmental boundaries, should anything to do with benefits have anything to do with health? Are you, if you want to put it crudely, are you bringing the benefits police into the health system? I can tell you, the people who benefit from this help do not view it like that. They think it's been really beneficial, for example, to be referred for work help by an organisation that might have been helping them with a physical or mental health problem. So I don't think we should be scared of that. On the question of who's doing it, who do we contract with and so on, This applies right across the board to these employment support programs. This is why I'm really interrogating this. How are we spending this money? With whom are we working with as local partners? And are we sure we're getting the best bang for our buck? I suspect in this world, with every respect to the organisation you quoted, they might be totally right, but I suspect in this world, you're probably always going to get somebody that says, you shouldn't be doing it that way, you should be doing it this way, or you shouldn't be doing it with that organisation, you should be doing it with this other organisation, and we should listen to that. We probably won't keep everybody happy here, but I have really stressed to the team the need for curiosity, considering all the different experience out there and the expertise in these programmes, because it is an investment from the state, ultimately funded by the taxpayer, to try to help get people into work. Peter, do you want to say a bit more about how the Connect to Work programmes are trying to do what I've just been...
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's £1 billion across England and Wales. And in England and Wales, it's being led. It's a new way of doing things, actually, to be more led by local authorities rather than centrally contracted by the department. So each local authority area, and there are 49 areas in total, if you include those mayoral strategic authorities with the integrated settlement. But there are 49 in total, 47 excluding those 2 with the integrated settlement. And we are working with each of those. They bring forward their plans, we interrogate them in the spirit of what the Secretary of State was just saying in terms of what outcomes are they delivering. And then we agree a funding package. So the latest is that we've announced that, well, 23 of the 49 areas in total are now live. We've agreed funding for a further 30, so that accounts for 650 million of the total of £1 billion for the period up until 2030. And we are making good progress with the others, so they should all be up and running absolutely well in advance of the next financial year.
Okay. In your response to our recent report on reforming job centres, you said that you would review the performance of those new programmes. So will that include measuring the performance of individual providers?
Yeah, I think we should look at the programmes and see how they're working for all the reasons we've just been discussing. And evaluation is a constant part of this. And there's risks involved in this. If you go with a number of different providers, it won't all work. Mm-hmm. And some people will say, you wasted money by going with this provider over here. That can happen in this programme. But I think if we were so risk averse, that we always said, we're only going to do this one way, this has been successful in the past, so we're never going to change what we do, I think we would be missing opportunities. There's a varied landscape out there. There are people with real expertise in trying to help, in this case, sick and disabled people into work. And I think we should use that expertise. And so the more local approach will probably give more varied results, but I think it will also enable us to tap into a greater variety of expertise in the long term too.
Which is very much the approach by doing this locally led rather than a centrally contracted model, as we've done with so many employment programs in the past. You can tailor it to the local labour market, but you can also have better connection with other local providers who might be particularly relevant in a local context that we wouldn't know about from Whitehall, but would be known about locally. So we'll see, hopefully, some really interesting, innovative approaches coming through. But you're absolutely right, Ms. Baxter, we will then test and track progress and evaluate. We launched an evaluation strategy setting out our whole approach to evaluation back in July that was published. And that gives a bit of a framework. And as I said earlier in my answer to Ms. Ali, in terms of the metrics that we're already publishing on a quarterly basis, you'll be able to see interwork rates by local authority area and job centre district level and movement through conditionality groups. So in real time, every quarter, hopefully you'll be able to see some of the progress in each of your areas as well as the national picture.
And will those stats only be for England and Wales? Will you also have that level of detail for Scotland?
That is a good. I think they're GB wide. Yes, they'll be GB wide.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading them. So the guarantee of employment support for disabled people is to come with a new baseline expectation of engagement. How will you guarantee that this new expectation does not result in people being forced into taking unsuitable work or undertaking activities beyond their capabilities?
I'm working with them, really. I talked about the 2 doors earlier. We are already inviting tens of thousands of people to come forward with conversations, some of whom have not been contacted for years. And I've visited job centres and met some people involved in this. Of course, these are the people who've come forward, so that's a particular group, but they all want to work if they can. Now, some people are carrying a lot. There's been a lot going on in their lives, difficult issues. This isn't like flicking a switch. That's why this employment support is important. But I think, going back to what I said about sort of doing things differently, I don't think we should shy away from making the effort. I think it's really important, because I think that the 2-door system that we inherited was too content to just leave people forever. So we're inviting people to come forward. The people I've met are enormously praising of the employment support advisors they've worked with in the job centres, who are helping them work through things, get back into a position where they might be able to apply for jobs. To go back to that question we talked about, young people and confidence, sometimes this can apply to older people who haven't worked for years either. They need more confidence to get back out there. And so these employment support programmes are really important in dealing with that too. So I'm optimistic about it. And I think we can help a lot more people than we have in the past. Obviously, that's going to be important because, as I said, the elected government has made a decision to prioritise this and to put taxpayers' money into these programmes to help do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a break in a wee while, but before we do, I wonder if I could ask you, this is a marked contrast in terms of an expectation, as you're calling it, but does draw disabled people into conditionality. Why the decision was made compared, for example, when you look at the New Deal for disabled people, which was voluntary, but still managed to get tens of thousands of disabled people into work and successful work, up to 12%, over three years, sustained employment. Why you've decided to draw this into a conditionality regime? And again, going back to my first question about safeguarding, what considerations were given around safeguarding in this regard. I don't expect a response now, but I would be grateful for a written response on that. We will take our break now. Order. Work and Pensions Select Committee evidence session with the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions and the Permanent Secretary. And we're going to continue now with Damien Egan.
Thank you, Chair. Secretary of State, you've spoken, I felt, passionately about some of the challenges in facing the welfare state, and you've talked about how governments have had to address and change things to meet the times and challenges of the current. One of the principles that you've put forward and spoken about is an element of contributory-based benefits, returning to the historic values of the Attlee government in setting up the welfare state. I know, I'm sure we've all had this, you knock on doors, and occasionally, for me it's mostly men who will get often 50 plus, be made redundant, and then are quite shocked to turn up to the job centre and expecting that there would be some sort of contributory element.
What's the phrase they say to you?
They receive.
You can guess it, can't you? They say, I paid in all my life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people feel disrespected. And so I wanted to ask you more about your thoughts on that and thoughts on timescales about when, because obviously this is something that will take a time.
Well, we could be here all morning with this, because I think it's a really interesting and important question. And we heard reference to it actually in a statement from the Home Secretary on Monday in a different context. But this idea of contribution as part of the welfare state. Now, I won't be here all morning, Madam Chair, don't worry, I won't. But just obviously the history of this is the original concept of the welfare state in this country and many other countries was a contributory system. And that has been taken over time by a needs-based system. And a needs-based system can have advantages in targeting, but it also creates a looser contract with the constituents that you speak about, who will say, we've talked about the doorstep a few times in this session, but they will say, I paid in all my life. That's the phrase you hear. And so this work began before I was the Secretary of State, but I'm enthusiastic about it. The idea of recreating more of a contributory unemployment insurance element, non-means tested, based on your contributions as part of the system is, I think, a good one. It's one that we hope to take forward next year. And the idea is pretty simple, that for a limited period of time, people who've got a good national insurance contribution record will be entitled to such a benefit. Now, most people who become newly unemployed roll off the unemployment records within a few months. If people have got a good work record, they've lost their job. It doesn't happen with everyone, but often within 3 or 4 months they will roll off. But I think putting more of this into the system is a good idea. The other major contributory part of the system is the state pension itself. But beyond that, there's really not a lot left in terms of contributory benefits. The committee will be familiar with all that, but that's the idea. And I think it is something that will have public support because I think it's something that the public think is probably a greater part of the system than actually is. And they expect it to be because that was the founding principle of a lot of these benefits.
Thank you. And then one other question, which on a different subject, and this is about translation services in job centres. It's a bit of a sensitive one, so I'm going to be careful. But one of the things I was struck on visits to my local job centre and sort of feedback is the increasing number of people using translation services in my still a minority. But there's a real challenge that's been raised with us, and it was raised with the Select Committee when we did a visit to a job centre in Manchester, is the lack of availability of English lessons. Now, this is one of those examples of cross-departmental working, 'cause this is where DFE comes in, but lots of these services will be provided through and referred by job centres. We heard of people being offered 1 or 2 mornings a week, and I know in my local job centre in Kingswood, hearing examples of people still using translators after 8 years. So not only is there, you haven't got the lessons, but there's the lack of compulsion to it, which makes sense because you haven't got the lessons to make anything compulsory. I'd be interested in your thoughts and how DFE and DWP can work together to provide more English lessons, because it's not just about the translation side of it is the small part. The bigger part is so critical to learn English to get into work. Well,
technology will help people to some degree for a limited conversation. That's available on our smartphones and so on. Peter, what is the English language position in job centres at the moment?
Well, I mean, Mr. Egan is right. I mean, I've heard the same as I've travelled around and about, that some of the provision is not frequent enough. You'll be saying to someone, come to a weekly class, and what you actually need is a really intense period of support to get someone to a working level where they can get a job. So we're working locally, and one of the things about the change in the machinery of government is it gives us more leverage, to be honest, with FE colleges to work in terms of the right nature of support. So it is more appropriate for someone who's learning English to be ready for a job, to be job ready. So there's a lot of work going on in that and improvements locally. But you're right about the challenge that we're facing and have faced. Obviously, then in terms of support for people accessing benefits, there are, as you say, translation facilities that we use, that we get support for, and those work reasonably well. But the key thing for us is we want to get people job ready, and sometimes ESOL is the biggest barrier. So we want to really be making sure that provision is there, and it's a little bit patchy at the moment, but we're working on that so that is improved.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to child poverty now. You'll be aware, Secretary of State, that child poverty is a key determinant of health status. We know it's a causal determinant of infant mortality. We have one of the highest levels of infant mortality in Northern Europe. Every 1% increase in child poverty results in an additional 5.6 babies per 100,000 live births not reaching their first birthday. We also know it's a causal factor in terms of malnutrition, being a looked after child, and needing emergency care. And cleverer folk than I have been able to calculate the impact that will has on other departments. Recent UK Millennium Cohort study also revealed the association of prolonged childhood poverty and family adversity on young people who are NEET. So you're 5 times more likely to be NEET if you have experienced prolonged childhood poverty and family adversity. And that constitutes over half of the current cohort of NEET young people today. So have these factors been considered in relation to whether you have advocated for a full abolition of the 2-child limit? And can I also ask if you're considering having a protected minimum floor for social security support to offset the benefit cap responsible for pushing more children into deep poverty, about 350,000 more children into deep poverty. These are children who have parents who have less than 50% of the median income, much lower than the 60% of child poverty, kids that don't have beds to sleep in, and much worse. So that's my first question to you, Secretary of State. But I'd also like to understand if the UK Millennium Cohort analysis has actually or will actually affect the department's decision to remove the UC health from from young people rather under 22.
Hey, there's a lot there. Let me try and do it some justice. This is a bit of a frustrating reply, and I don't mean to be frustrating, but we said the child poverty strategy would be published in the autumn. Now, you would be quite fair in saying to me, Madam Chair, when you look outside, the leaves are falling and we're very much in autumn, but we've still got some of it to go, so I can't say everything to you today. Let me say a few things, though, that I can. The government does take this seriously. We had a commitment to reduce child poverty. We want to fulfil that commitment. We have taken some steps, important steps, to do that by extending free school meals to all families on universal credit, by extending the warm homes discount, which will be worth about £150 off energy bills to 1 in 6 families this winter, and by stabilising the Crisis and Resilience Fund to local authorities for the next 3 years. So those are important things, but they're not everything. Where I agree with you is the point you make about, as it were, things being connected, the thigh bone's connected to the knee bone. Does poverty have an impact on NEETs? Yes, it does. The Millennium Cohort analysis to which you referred, I have read, and it makes that point, among others. So these things are connected, and without anticipating any announcements that will be made, if there is further action on this, I want it to be seen not just as a benefits issue, but as a reduction in platform that will give the children who benefit from that, the families who benefit from that, an enhancement of opportunity elsewhere in their lives. And we talked elsewhere in this session about cross-departmental approaches to things. I think that's true of this, even though there's a specific social security question here about universal credit and the 2-child limit. If there's change on that, it should be seen in a much wider context across departments and also across the welfare state as a whole. But I don't want you to tempt me, Madam Chair, to go beyond what I've said this morning and to say more than I can on this specific date, even though I know that's a bit frustrating because of the timing of things.
Understood. I would like to pursue a couple of points, if I may, with you, Secretary of State. So I absolutely take on board the importance of the measures that have already been introduced. I think it is really clear in terms of the evidence that cash support is the key and instant way of alleviating the issues that children living in poverty face now. And let's remember that these children, these NEET children who've already experienced 10 plus years of living in absolute dire circumstances, that's affected their childhood. They are now, needing some attention in relation to that. It's recognised that cash support is the only way that you can instantly alleviate the poverty that they've experienced. So I want to link my question to you about the under-22s who are included in the UC Act as it is now. Many of those children have gone through significant difficulties. So in terms of the safeguarding approach your department is taking now, given what I have said and the impact on their health, giving the impact on of their opportunities to be in employment, how are you addressing that in a safeguarding approach, given the arbitrary nature of selecting 22 as an age when you're not meant to be ill?
Well, there's sort of two different parts to that. Let me try and deal with them one by one. On cash support and the speed of it and so on, it's a point well made. You've made it, many other people have made it to us too, as you can imagine, not just in the 3 months that I've been the Secretary of State, but also in the much longer work of the Child Poverty Task Force, of which I am co-chair with, along with the Secretary of State for Education. But I'll leave that there for now. On the under-22s, can I just clarify, did you mean the proposal to withdraw, or the suggestion of withdrawing UC Health from under-22s? Yes. Yeah, look, we haven't made a decision on it, but the argument for it would be these benefits are sticky. And if we can get more opportunity for people and less chance of them going through that long-term sickness door and staying on it, that is better for them in the long run. Now, we may have a difference of opinion on that, and that's fine. We won't always agree. But again, I want to speak to the committee always with candour. Now, we haven't made a decision on that. Not to repeat earlier answers, but all of this whole issue of young people, sickness, unemployment and work, all within the terms of what I've asked Alan Milburn to look at in the next few months. So it's in there, and I don't want to make a decision on it until we've looked at things in the round. Okay.
And again, I make the point around evidence. It's not my opinion. It is the evidence that the right approach. Of course, we need to. We don't want to ensure that we're giving the right support and evidence-based support. I'm making the point based on this evidence that a conditionality approach rather than a supportive approach may have not the outcome that we would want to see.
Well, you could argue that the evidence shows if you go on these benefits at a young age, you tend to stay on them, and that's not very good for your life. There's plenty of evidence for that too.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Joanna Baxter.
Thank you. So the Children's Commissioners for the devolved nations told us in September that they hadn't met with yourself or your predecessor at the time. Can you confirm you've met with them now? And how will you improve coordination with the devolved nations?
I haven't met with the Children's Commissioners from the devolved nations. I've had lots of meetings in the last few months. I'm very happy to meet with people, and I'm sure we can arrange that. On the relations, your broader question about relationships with the devolved nations, this used to be my job in the Cabinet Office, where I think we had, for obvious reasons, I took it seriously. I think it is important. In the benefits world, we of course have, and especially now with skills being added to the department, we've got a sort of mixed picture here, where some of what we do is GB-wide. Obviously things like universal credit and the state pension and so on is GB-wide. Other parts of the skills world are devolved, so we're going to have to just work within, within all those parameters. I mean, my general view of this is government to government. Yes, people have got their different political colours, and you've got a Scottish Parliament election coming up in 6 months' time, where it will be very hot for obvious reasons. But on a government to government basis, I think whatever people's political colour, they want more opportunity for people, they want security for people. And I'm reasonably optimistic that on a day-to-day level we can work pretty well with the Scottish Government and the Welsh Government.
And I'd endorse that. I mean, over the last few years we've seen quite a significant devolution of benefits to Scotland, particularly in the health and disability world, and that's been done in a really joined-up, effective way. I've had regular meetings with my opposite number in Scotland, and a joint team that's been working together, and those programmes have successfully met milestones and supported our Scottish customers to continue to receive benefits as benefits are devolved.
Thank you.
Baron.
I just want to pick up on a point that you kind of brushed on earlier on in relation to the child poverty strategy. and publication.
Yeah.
And as you say, we're well into autumn.
Yeah,
there are still some more bits to be done. So the question really is there a ballpark sort of timing you could give us in relation to, not an exact, but will it be before the end of the year? Will it be early part of next year? Because obviously there's a lot riding on it, and there's been a lot of priority, with it since the election of July 2024. So a lot of us are keen.
I totally understand that. Autumn's quite a flexible parliamentary term, but I don't think I could stretch it into next year. So you won't have too long to wait for some conclusions, and it is just the way that the session falls when it does, and I can only tell you what I can tell you today. I can't really say more than that this morning.
Okay, thank you. Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Chair. Just moving on to pensioner poverty. So the previous committee published a report on pensioner poverty in June. And then in July, the government set up a new pension commission. But in the recommendations from the report that we did in June, we concluded the lack of central government strategy for ageing society is holding back progress. Is there a reason why there was a decision made not to commit to a cross-governmental strategy for an ageing society? And do you see the Pension Commission to address some of those issues?
Yes, we do. So this is really, the committee's interest is in the gradual raising of the state pension age and what effect that has on people who are maybe just a few years short of the state pension age. So we have started let me say two things. First of all, we should always learn from each time it goes up. It's gone up to 66, it's going up to 67. We've launched a process for considering a further rise to 68. That process should consider all the evidence, life expectancy, all the impacts, and hopefully it will do that. And alongside that, we also have the other consideration that we've got of a look at what's happened with auto enrolment after a very successful policy, but with gaps in it after many years of its introduction. So it is important to consider all the evidence in the work of these bodies, and I hope they do.
I mean, obviously something that we discuss as a committee is the overall concern about pension adequacy, that there is a real sort of risk of actually a lot of pensioner poverty, and that actually getting more problematic. As you say, in the run-up to people retiring, there are more individuals going on to the out-of-work benefits for ill health, and so I'd be really interested to sort of hear about how you consider the challenge of pension adequacy long-term.
Let me make a few points in response to that. Well, first of all, when people become actually state pension age, they of course get the state pension, and the government has kept its commitment to the triple lock, and that should mean a rise in the state pension of roughly £1,900 a year over the course of the whole Parliament. It's a very important commitment to maintain the value of the state pension year on year, so it's important to say that. On the years running up to that, there's more people in that age group in work as the state pension age goes up, and there's some numbers on that. For those who are not in work, then the working age benefits are available. Now, working age benefits tend to be a bit lower than the state pension, but if we were to say they shouldn't be, we'd effectively be reversing the increase in the state pension age. That's not government policy to do that. The reason they're a bit lower, I guess, is they are thought not to be permanent, that someone could be in work up until the age when they get the state pension, whereas the state pension itself is set at a level that assumes that after you get it, you're unlikely to be in work again. So we've got to take all these things into account. The final thing to say is, for a proportion of pensioners, a significant proportion, they may be drawing on some kind of occupational pension in the years before they actually reach state pension age 2. I don't know if you want to add anything on this, Peter.
Yeah, no, just a few things to add, just to build on your point, Secretary of State, about looking at that period running up to state pension age, and particularly at those moments when that state pension age is going up. So we did reviews and evaluation when the state pension age went from 65 to 66, so between about 2018 and 2020. And the Secretary of State said that did then demonstrate, I think, around 55,000 more people in employment through that period. So that is a response that people can make, and would obviously be doing a lot of work to support people to get into work at that stage. As the state pension age rises now from 66 to 67 from April next year, so we'll continue to evaluate and monitor through the HBAI statistics, the household below average income statistics that we publish every year, and we'll be able to evaluate what happens for those people as well. And alongside that, we've commissioned a second wave of planning and preparing for later life, which is a survey of adults between 40 and 75 across GB. And that is really looking at how people are preparing for retirement and also their experience in the early period of retirement as well. So it's really important, there's all input that the Pension Commission can take into account as they consider adequacy going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. I think it was one of the DWP's report that showed that 30% of the increase in out of incapacity benefits was due to the increase in state pension and demographic changes. Will the Commission be looking at that in a bit more detail as well?
We'll have that available alongside everything else. I mean, as you say, the increase in incapacity benefits is in part related to some demographic impacts, as you say.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to Steve Darling, please.
Thank you. So I'd like to turn to winter fuel payments now, bearing in mind we've seen two approaches in the last 2 winters around winter fuel payments. What learnings would you say the Department have had around winter fuel payments that can be applied to policy?
Well, I hope we have a settled position now. You're right, the position has changed over the last couple of years. What's the learnings? That's people value their winter fuel payment. That's certainly one learning. I believe it is right to, in this payment, to take account of income in some way. That is what we've done now. We've set it at the new level for this winter, and I think we've got the balance right now. I did get a text message from someone this morning who I know has just had her winter fuel payment, so they are being paid out. So I think we've got to the right place now. If I might take the opportunity, Madam Chair, we have had some attempts at fraud and scams to try to get people to give their personal details to through phone messages. I did highlight this on the media about a month ago. We will never ask for people, just to put it on the record, we will never ask for people's financial details over the phone like that. And if I can use this sort of additional opportunity to make clear that people should be wary of these scams, not respond to any message like that. They'll get their winter fuel payment in the normal way, and not to be sucked in by any of these scams.
Thank you. The Social Security Advisory Committee have highlighted a bit of an injustice where those older people who are in residential care homes do not benefit from winter fuel payments and therefore supporting their current living situation. What plans do you have to actually remedy this injustice?
A new situation.
I believe it has gone on for some time.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if you know, Peter, I'm not sure that's a new situation. So, look, I'm very happy to meet the Social Security Advisory Committee. In fact, I think I might be meeting them tomorrow.
The opportunity.
And they can raise it with me there. But just for the purposes of clarity, and people can always point out to things in the system which they think are wrong, but for clarity purposes, I think the situation you're highlighting is not a feature of the changes in the payments of winter fuel payments over the last couple of years. But
yeah, I don't think it is. I think it relates to the fact that if someone is in residential care where their care is paid for by the local authority, then their access to benefit, because the state provision of funds is through the local authority to fund their care and their living costs. So they're not able to access things like certain types of benefit, like attendance allowance, for example.
I hear that argument, but I would equally suggest that there have been significant increases in fuel costs for residential care homes as well. So they have faced their own challenges, and support through this would be helpful. Is that anything that you would explore at all, or is it not really on the table?
Not a commitment I can make today. Let me put it that way.
So I'd then like to just explore the link between fuel. So last winter was very much a focus on those who received pensioner credit getting winter fuel, and that drive there to get more people to get on the pensioner credit agenda, which is really important and successful. I note that about 200 local authorities engaged positively with the government. Two angles of inquiry on this one. How could you get more local authorities to work closely with the Department of Work and Pensions? And how are you sharing best practice of how local authorities got more pensioners to get the support that they deserve?
Well, there was a lot of effort put into getting people to apply for pension credit. This had been a long-running issue going back many years, where many people entitled to the benefit didn't apply for it. We had some success. I think it was it an extra 60,000 people?
60,000 additional awards.
Who got additional awards, which is significant. And, you know, that was in part through efforts to get people to apply, and the situation remains, if we have a benefit like pension credit that's there to help pensioners on low incomes, we want them to be aware of it and to apply if possible. Is there anything more you want to say, Peter, about the learnings, as it were, from that particular effort last year?
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of important elements. I mean, obviously the link to winter fuel payments was a big impact, but there were other things that we did too. I mean, as you said, Mr. Darling, that relationship with the local authorities, working locally, is really important, and we're going to be doing research, understanding what motivates people to claim pension credit. So looking at sort of the customer journey, if I can put it that way, so we can get a better understanding about what factors really make an impact. I think one of the things that I thought was really effective is mobilising family and friends of older people to encourage their relative or friend to make a claim and to be aware of that. Because so many older people, and talking to Age UK, for example, you know, they don't necessarily claim because they don't feel they should claim, and we want them to claim because if they're entitled to this is an important support. So how can we get other people who potential pension credit claimants trust to be encouraging them to claim as well? And then the other thing is making the claim process as easy as possible. So these are all things we'll be doing, but there's further research on this.
And the other bit I just wanted to touch on was, you know, we had the pleasure of meeting yesterday, and we talked about stopping having a siloed approach to actually tackling some of the issues that DWP are there to tackle. How is there a greater opportunity of working with HMRC or others to try and draw more pensioners into receiving pension credit?
You tempt me to have a discussion about digital ID and its benefits. And data sharing between departments could certainly be one of those benefits, because the lack of a digital ID reinforces the silos which members have expressed some frustration about this morning. But perhaps I'm straying beyond my brief, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
But there is an important, I mean, there's an important data element to this, Mr. Darling, even within DWP. So one of the things that we've done a lot of over the last year is looking at housing benefit claims by pensioners and seeing whether we can get an indication from them as to whether they might be entitled to pension credit. And then writing to those people, I think we wrote to about 120,000 folk over the last winter who we thought on the basis of their housing benefit claim might be eligible to pension credit, encouraging them to claim. So, you know, some of these things we can do more within DWP, but even before we start to work with other departments, but we need to do more of that too.
Thank you.
Thank you. David, do you want to come in here as well?
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So just on the winter fuel, I think the original decision was a mistake. I agree. I think we've ended up in the right place. I certainly hope it's a settled place we've ended up in. The threshold, when it was set at 35,000, that did surprise some people that it was so high. I know you can't win. But how was that threshold chosen? And you might not be able to answer this, but I'll ask it anyway. Is it likely to change in future years as cost of living, inflation, etc. changes? Or within this Parliament at least, is it likely to change, or will it stay at or around that figure?
It was set before I became the Secretary of State, so you know, there's maybe not too much I can say about that. I think there'll always be debate about this, and there may be some people who think it should be higher or lower. My view now that I'm in the job is that that is a reasonable threshold for this. I don't think there's a case for paying this to every pensioner, regardless of their how wealthy they are. What happens in the future, I can't anticipate. But I think we've reached to a stable place on this right now.
Thank you. John Milne.
Thank you, Chair. Last week you said that you would review your response to the PHSO's report on 1950s women, or WASPI women, as otherwise known. And this was said to be due to looking again at some research findings from a 2007 DWP research on automated pension forecasts. Can you tell us what was it in that review, or what aspects of it that has provoked you to take another look at it?
Well, the principal thing is it wasn't shown to the previous Secretary of State, so it wasn't possible for her to take that into account in making the decision that she made. So when it was cited in the judicial review of that decision, I took the view that the right course of action was to retake the decision, taking into account several things. First of all, this piece of survey research. Secondly, all the material that had previously been taken into account as well, because we don't take a decision like this based on just one thing. But thirdly, of course, asking the department, is there anything else that may not have been drawn to the previous Secretaries of State's attention that might be relevant to this decision? I made the statement to Parliament last week. We're now going through that process that I've just outlined. I think you asked me, Madam Chair, roughly how long will this take when we had the statement last week, and I said I would do it as soon as possible. I know that's perhaps a frustrating answer, but we're going through that process. I don't want to take too long about it, but I do want to do it proper justice. So I'll return to the House properly when I've retaken the decision and have something to announce. And for the purposes of completeness, I should say that I don't want anyone to read any assumptions into the conclusion by virtue of me retaking the decision. I suspect that's all that it's sensible for me to say about that this morning.
Yeah, I think lots of people are drawing assumptions, as is not surprising. So that's thank you for that clarification. So, was there anything particularly in the research that has?
Well, it's in the library of the House. It's available to the committee. It's available for anybody that wants to look at it. It's a whole set of questions. It's a chunky document. It's about 150 pages, I think, and a lot of it is concerned with printed material that's sent out and how effective it is, and people's recall of it, and so on. But I'm being careful, Madam Chair, for reasons that I think you'll understand. I don't want to say too much more.
Okay. This research was provided to the PHSO prior to its report to Parliament. Yes. So there's a little bit of confusion as to why it's only just come to light.
Yeah, it's a good question. It isn't new in that sense. The PHSO did have access to this. It has been cited in the legal case. Again, you're slightly tempting me to go maybe further than I should. So it isn't new in a sense, but I think it has not been fully considered in the context of this decision before, if I can put it that way. And that's the process that we're going through now. But I stress again, please don't assume any conclusion or tempt me to preempt the decision that I've got to take.
Yeah.
Let me just over to Joanna Baxter.
Thank you. Your predecessor planned to work with the PHSO on an action plan to ensure that lessons have been learned from this maladministration. Is that something you intend to take forward? If you're already taking it forward, can you give us an update on that?
Yes, we are. It's important to do. Minister for Pensions, probably more in the driving seat directly, but yes, with my full support, we are working with the PHSO on this to come up with an action plan. And this whole area of how we communicate with people and how it changes over time and how people get their information is relevant to government policy. So it's all part of that. Do you want to add anything about the action plan, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, it also covers complaint handling as well. And we've agreed that we would have 6 monthly reviews. I met the Ombudsman, the new Ombudsman, earlier in the year. We talked briefly about this, but this is being led at working level. And, you know, as the Secretary of State says, you know, learning about the best way of communicating as technology and people's means of receiving information changes. How do we work with that and ensure that, alongside how do we respond to complaints, which was another element of this work as well. So these are the two main headings for the action plan. And
perhaps you can come back to us once that action plan's been completed. But can I also ask, what evaluation have you made of the awareness of people affected by the forthcoming increase to the SPA from 66 to 67 starting in April next year?
Peter, what has changed over time as the state pension goes up?
I mean, probably the biggest thing is the online facility. So making it easy for you to check your state pension. And what that does is it enables anyone running up to state pension age, but anyone of working age, to be able to go online through the government gateway or one login in time to enable them to see their national insurance contribution record, what that would then mean for them in terms of when they retire and what they're likely to receive in retirement. So a much more sophisticated, tailored approach, making that available to people. And these are the sorts of changes that we've made over time.
Very quickly, I appreciate things have changed, but what assessment have you made of the awareness of that increase?
Well, it's part of, I talked earlier about the research we're doing in terms of helping to understand people's understanding as they approach retirement age, and that's something that we'll keep the committee up to date with.
Thank you. John Milne, very briefly.
Thank you. And this question about pre-97 pensions and lack of indexing. So a lot of people have looked at the pension schemes bill, which has been passing through Parliament, as a possible solution to this long-standing problem. Are they wrong to look at, or do you think that the distribution of surplus payments is a potential solution? having heard, I was on the committee and having heard evidence to this committee, I don't feel that there is going to be that's not going to lead to what the campaigners are looking for. Would you agree? Do you think it will lead to some recompense for those lack of discretionary interests? Do we need to enforce the powers of trustees or the pensions regulator? And overall, what's the solution?
Okay. So I believe the Minister for Pensions has written to the committee within the last few days with something of an update on this.
Yes, we just got that right at the start of this meeting, so I haven't had time to absorb it.
To recap the position, the pensions bill deals with this by facilitating a dialogue between trustees and employers in a situation where there is a surplus. Each of them's got their legal responsibilities. I'm obviously not going to sit here and say that the legislation that we're just putting through Parliament isn't going to work. We've legislated for that because we believe that can be a fruitful way forward. We've worked very closely with the pensions regulator on doing this. It is a problem, if you want to call it that. The problem of surplus is something of a new thing, or the question of surplus. When I was a minister in the last Labour government, it was all about pension deficits and people having to make extra payments to make up deficits. Now that we've got these schemes that are in surplus, the pensions bill allows now a dialogue between the trustees and employers to see if there can be an agreement to use some of that surplus to address the pre-1997 indexation issue that you're asking about.
I agree, but Minister, I would say that the employers who are, as it were, the guilty party in this, they've shown their hand over many years. I'm not seeing anything, unless they're forced to take action. I can't see why they're going to behave in a different way.
Well, I'm not going to call stumps on brand new legislation before it's had a chance to have an effect. So let's see what effect it has. And we put those provisions in the bill precisely because we wanted to have a mechanism to address the problem that you're raising today and that I know the committee is interested in.
And is there not a danger that the surplus, as a result of that bill, the surpluses will be used in other ways to reward the company, so that opportunity will go? I understand you want to see the legislation have impact, but this is a point, we take the opportunity now or we lose it.
There's more than one use for surpluses, yes, and some people are selling the schemes to insurance companies and all the rest of it. But the bill allows for this, it facilitates it, and I think we should give it a chance to see how it works.
And it's important to emphasise that decisions on the release of surpluses are with the trustees, and but we'll continue to monitor how trustees use these powers as they're granted by Parliament, and the pension regulator will also have a role overseeing this too.
I appreciate that, but we did hear evidence that I would think cast doubt on whether that's actually going to be effective. However, I will pass back to Chair because I know we're very tight on time.
Thank you so much. Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. Turning to the pensions dashboard, we had an evidence session earlier this year on trying to press for when this was going to be delivered. I mean, clearly there's been a lag in this space. I've spoken to and met with a number of private sector providers who are frustrated as well that this is holding back their own rollout. When is this going to be rolled out?
So the deadline for everybody to be signed up to it is September next year?
October.
It's October, forgive me, October next year. And when everybody's signed up to it, there'll be a bit of testing and all of that. So I can't say we go live the next day, but that's a very important deadline in giving the basic information for the dashboard to work. I do appreciate this has gone on for a long time. We've been talking about a pension dashboard for many years. It relates a bit to the question Joanna Baxter asked a few moments ago about the state pension. This is an important mechanism for letting people know their entitlements in the round. So October next year is an important deadline. That's not a go live deadline. That's a deadline for everybody who needs to be signed up to it.
Which links me to my final point I wanted to ask. So I don't doubt your commitment to wanting to implement change, and a lot of the stuff you said today I agree with, actually, in terms of needing to take the country forward. But your success is really based on the deliverability of your department, the civil servants, the quangos, the various independent bodies that you engage with to deliver the policy agenda you want to push forward. Are you confident there's the right culture, ability, work ethic, ethos to deliver those changes? Because ultimately politicians are held to account, but delivery of those falls with other people.
Well, that's the system where I'm being held to account here, and very happy to be in front of this select committee. That's part of our parliamentary system. Before I came to see you this morning, I was explaining this to my 14-year-old daughter, and what an important mechanism for parliamentary accountability these appearances were. So I'm not here to... Of course, ministers will have their frustrations about delivery or speed. Yes, they're also part of life, but the system we have is, in an elected democracy like ours, the ministers who lead departments have a responsibility to drive them as best they can to deliver the government policy decisions that are taken. So that goes with the territory, and I believe that the vast majority of people who work in our public services want to do a good job for the public they serve, and want to do the best job they can.
Thank you so much, Secretary of State, Permanent Secretary. It's a pleasure to have had you give evidence to the committee.